Great, well, welcome. My name is Richard Tom. I actually oversee the engineering team over at Hulu. And today we're going to be covering a lot of different topics, an array of topics really ranging from a lot of technical deep dives to an overview of the video landscape, the past and the present. But through all of this, I think the main core concept really that we're trying to capture here is the opportunities and challenges that are afforded by the ever-connected landscape that we have, whether it's in your pockets with a computer and a mobile phone, tablets, or in your living room. So we'll cover quite a bit of topics there. And then finally, really what I wanted to try to cover are some thoughts around how you can foster innovation in the face of a lot of these different challenges. Before I get started on that, what I thought would be helpful is for you guys to get some context into why we believe video is so critical. And I thought I'd start with a mission that we have over at Hulu, which is to help people find and enjoy the world's premium content when, where, and how they want it. And the reason why we think that's such an ambitious goal is that if you take a look at an average American's day, and these metrics here come from Nielsen, what you'd find is that an average American spends about 8.5 hours sleeping. I know that stat is very surprising to me too. That's a fairly large number there. They spend about 7.5 hours working. Again, another bit of a shock for me. And finally, they spend about 4.5 hours watching video. So you can see that that's an incredibly large number. And in terms of total capacity, in terms of what people spend their time with, video is very high on the top of the list. And so for us, it's very, very exciting because it represents an opportunity for us to reinvent the way people spend a large portion of their time. We can fundamentally help people improve their day-to-day activities. And so if you took a look very quickly in terms of where the innovation has been happening over the years since the invention of television, one of the very interesting things that starts to emerge as you take a look at this timeline, and again, it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it's meant to give you a really quick snapshot of where the invention or innovation has been happening. What you'd find is most of it is really related to capture and playback. And so a lot of the invention over the years, whether it's the VCR, the DVR, really has been focused on how can you capture video and how can I play it back. And now what we're finding over the last number of years is that there's been an extreme focus with all the connected services and all the connected devices to really providing people with personalization in video and freedom. And that freedom comes in many different forms, whether it's in your ability to watch where you want to watch it, or whether it's having the opportunity to watch video that you're looking for. And so tons and tons of great opportunities that emerge from the connected space that we're in. And from that perspective, I think you can really break up all of those opportunities into two major buckets. The opportunities that are afforded by services, and then those that are provided by devices. And so I thought I'd start off with services. From a services perspective, one way I like to think about things is how people conduct their daily lives. And so if you take a look, today if you read a book, if you watch a TV show, if you read a magazine, a lot of the times folks seem to think about that as a very personal, very isolated type of experience, something that's kind of done on your own. But if you took a look at somebody's day, the day after they watch an SNL video or perhaps read a new book, what you'd find is that folks have a lot of these water cooler moments where they're having great conversations around the content that they're consuming. And so what I see with connected services is that it provides us with this great opportunity to bring those digital water cooler moments online. And so that's one of the great opportunities that I see that connected services will provide us. Another one really revolves around all the great data that's available to us when you're connected to great services. Now, that data can be related to crowdsourced type data. It could be professionally produced. But the great thing about this data is that it really augments the experience that folks have with all the different types of content that you might be working with. In particular, for video, that's true. But you can even take a look at that from a perspective of a Kindle app. If you take a look at how you read on the Kindle today and having access to great public notes from other folks, it really changes your experience with even simple things like just reading a book and having a great experience, understanding what other people thought in terms of the books that they're reading. And of course, another area that's critically valuable in terms of a connected world is the fact that you now are able to capture an array of different experiences and feedback from the users themselves. Every action that they take, whether it's an active response, like giving a thumbs up, or whether it's a passive set of information that they provide you, like selecting a specific article or video, provides you with a wealth of information that can be leveraged in many, many ways. And I thought I'd share some of those. Clearly, one of the great opportunities that you have with all of that rich information is the ability to actually really identify what's most meaningful for your users. Really, how do you start to incorporate a lot of that great information that you're getting to drive the decisions that you have for your design, for the features that you include in your platforms, and even the features that you start to remove to simplify the service that you have. Another amazing opportunity, particularly in the video space, is for us to really get a clear understanding of our users and really improve their experience so you can avoid something like this, where you have an ad that clearly does not resonate with a user. And we found that we can get, by taking a look at all the great metrics that we get from a user, we can get close to 96 or 98% accuracy on the gender of a specific user who's watching. And so if you start to look at that from that perspective, you can see that there's great advantages to leveraging all of that data. So now onto the devices side. Clearly, devices provide you with incredible freedom. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that everybody today is walking around with a computer in their pocket provides them with the freedom and flexibility of watching video on the go. They can actually literally pick up their phone while they're on the ride to work and catch up on a video. They can read a book. And what's even more interesting nowadays is the fact that you can leverage an array of devices, whether it's your Blu-ray disc player, your connected television, or even your gaming consoles, to watch video and actually view other content online. So freedom is incredibly valuable, I think, for most users. And it's something that, again, comes to us by way of all the great devices. Another area that's actually pretty interesting that I think you'll start to see a lot more of is how can you start to improve the customer service that we provide to our users. Here's one scenario where a user may bump into some type of issue while they're trying to stream a piece of content. Typically, their only option today would be to call customer support, log a ticket, wait for some time to hope that they get some kind of information back soon. But in the future, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to have our customer support folks actually directly communicate with the platform or the service that the user's actually encountering some issues with, run some diagnostics, get some information back, and try to help the user a little bit quicker. So again, our connected world will provide us with a lot of opportunity to even improve the user's experience and their support. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the companion-type experiences that you're going to start to see explode over the next year or two. In particular, you're starting to see things like the Wii U, which will provide some really interesting companion experiences. But you can imagine this across any type of devices. Here you see an example of a TV show being watched and a lot of great information being provided to the user on a second screen. Today, we do some of these augmented experiences online in Hulu with things like Face Match, where as you're watching a video online, you can actually hover over somebody's face. And again, as I mentioned before, leveraging the great metadata that's out there, we can display contextual information for a user. Another great example of that would be watching Paula Deen and seeing a cooking show and being able to take your tablet into your kitchen, hearing the audio from the video, and actually being able to pull up the recipes on your tablet or second screen. So again, a lot of really interesting opportunities for the future. Now, not all of these are here today, but clearly a path is there and has been drawn. So clearly there's a ton of great opportunities that we can see ahead. But along with those opportunities, there's always going to be a ton of challenges. And I thought it'd be interesting for us to walk through this by looking at historically what most of the folks in this room have probably seen at some point. You may even be in that today, which is, for a lot of folks, you'll probably start off with one data center in terms of serving up a lot of your content. You may have one CDN if you have enough traffic and you're looking to cache quite a bit. And typically, you'd at least support 4 browsers. And for a lot of the developers in the room, I'm sure you can relate to the fact that even supporting 4 browsers can be challenging in that you've got to make sure that your CSS, your JavaScript, and all your logic actually ports across all of these different platforms. And the reality is that we've come a long way over the years. We've got a lot of great open source projects that help you get much further along than in previous years. But things have changed. And I think that a lot of you are probably experiencing this right now, which is now you have two data centers. They're geo-load balanced. So you have kind of your traffic being distributed geographically. You're supporting significantly more CDNs now. And what's even tougher is the device explosion. So you're now supporting thousands upon thousands of different devices and different platforms, each one really starting to carry with it a lot of different considerations that are tough. Some of those are from a product and from a design perspective in terms of having to really come up with very unique designs for the different platforms that you're targeting, whether it's for the living room or for the mobile space. Each one of those are going to take different considerations. In the video space, there's tons of challenges around playback engines, each one of them having minor differences in terms of how they handle different profiles. And a painful reality is the reality that there's so many different DRM strategies that are across all these different platforms. There's a lot of standard bodies trying to get to a place where we can converge and give folks the flexibility of options. But today, it's a world that we have to live with. And then finally, of course, there's tons of languages and frameworks. What this means is that as you start to expand and build out a lot of native applications across all your different devices, what you're going to find is that you're going to need a very flexible development team, one that can actually go in, code in a variety of different languages, and be comfortable in different frameworks. And so as I think about the different device landscape, one of the things that emerges is that you really have to deal with three sets of folks. There's the device manufacturers, the mobile carriers, and the users. And all of them actually have the power to impact your ability to release quickly. All of them can gate releases, as you already know. In order to get an app into a marketplace or onto a device, a lot of the times device carriers can actually roll out the releases on their own cadence. Users can actually block an update and not actually decide to update. I think that's fairly common. And so gated releases present a really interesting challenge in that what happens is you're constantly having to support backwards compatibility. You're also having to have an array of test matrices, particularly if you're leveraging a lot of back-end services for your platforms. So I often think of devices, or at least the device landscape that we have today, as shrink-wrap software. And so a lot of the challenges that you would see there kind of translate over into the device space. And so in the face of all those challenges and all the risk that comes with those challenges, how do you mitigate that, and how do you begin to foster innovation? And so this is the part where we'll get into a little bit of a technical dive, but the idea really behind all of this is how do you start to set your development team up so that they can be successful in driving innovation? And when I think about that, a light bulb is often kind of used to describe innovation. That really is the most common image, I think, that people associate with innovation. And if you think about it from that perspective, then porting applications to thousands and thousands of different devices just to mimic the same experience across all these different devices truly is like a dimmer. It basically means that you're spending an incredible amount of your talent, of your energy, focused on porting devices versus innovating and providing users with new experiences that can be very meaningful. And so one of the things that we look to do as we go along and we start to build across an array of devices, providing users with that personalization, providing users with that freedom, is try to identify ways that you can actually reduce all of that complexity and that work. And so the very first thing that I thought we can cover is really to talk a little bit about automation. It really can impact various areas of the business, and I'd say that, I think about it a little bit in terms of two sides, the server side and in the services world, and then the devices side as well in terms of all the different applications that you're building. But one of the things that we found very, very helpful, and again, there's no magic bullet here, but one of the things that we found extremely helpful is to leverage automation. And one of the things you'll notice as I walk through these different points here is that I have a list of different open source projects or even Hulu internally made or built platforms that we've found to be extremely helpful. So from a build perspective or a continuous integration perspective, we found that by setting up continuous integration, we get, on every commit, we're able to see kind of our baseline in terms of how our stability and how the quality of our platform and services are running. you essentially get the opportunity to have a build, a deploy, and a test pass on every commit, which is incredibly powerful to ensure that you don't take steps backwards every time somebody commits to the repo. The next section, of course, is test, and I think that developers tend to fall into two different camps here. I will save all my testing efforts to the very end, and those who have it kind of built into the engineering DNA. And I think it's very, very tough to do that, to have that latter one. But I do think that it's extremely valuable to have folks focus on testing early on. And the reason for that is that as soon as you wait to the end, the complexity increases dramatically for you to try to enable your code for testing. So definitely start to have your team think about that because it's very critical. Provisioning, you'll notice here that these are two services that are built by the Hulu team. They're highlighted in green. And one of the things that we found is that provisioning servers is critical for developers. Now, I'm sure that a number of you are all on kind of a public cloud or a private cloud solution. We have our own private cloud solution that we've built internally. But one of the main goals for us was how do we give our developers access to all the different resources that they need as soon as they can, and how do we make it self-service? Our goal throughout kind of building out our operations team and our platform has always been, how do we empower our developers and our team to roll out platforms and services themselves? And so again, self-serve is an incredibly powerful model and provides users with, again, the developers with that freedom to be able to build very quickly. Now, on the configure and deployment side of things, again, there's a lot of really, really great options. And one of the great advantages to having and leveraging either some of the open source platforms that are out there for configuration and deployment is that it can really help reduce the amount of operations that you have to deal with. It ensures that you have a reliable way to configure and deploy your platforms, and it helps you ensure that it's going to be a very dependable mechanism. So instead of having a lot of manual different steps that your ops team has to take, you're able to write it all in code and have them actually deploy and configure machines very quickly. So again, another way to reduce the amount of human error that can go into any type of project. On the app side, you'll find a very similar set of opportunities when it comes to the technical side in terms of how you set up your engineering workflow. Again, it's slightly modified, obviously, because of the fact that it's on a specific device. You still have continuous integration, things that you should consider, deployment, and of course, testing. On the deployment side, one of the things that I think you'll find interesting in the living room and mobile space is that we haven't found a ton of helpful open source projects just yet. And that clearly is an indication of the nascency of the industry in terms of all the devices that are out there. But we're really starting to see some momentum being picked up there. So very excited about that as well. And a final one that I thought I'd share that I think is not always obvious or something that's thought of too often is documentation. On the server side, what you'll notice is a ton of different APIs being exposed to your developers. And those can be internal developers, it can be external developers if you're actually providing them with a platform to leverage. And so from that perspective, having documentation is extremely valuable. It reduces the amount of kind of conversations that have to happen back and forth between the developers. And so what we found that is very useful is to have that be a part of your engineering culture, to have your developers try to document as much as possible within their source. And then leverage a lot of these great automated services that will help extract some of those comments and put them together as documentation that's searchable. Again, another very nice way to put that as part of your engineering workflow and have folks be able to leverage that from an automation perspective. The next concept that I wanted to cover really revolves around serving and rendering. And one of the major complexities behind all of the different applications that you have today, again, as I mentioned before, is that so many of them require different languages and frameworks for your developers to get comfortable with. And so one of the ways that we found to be very, very useful in terms of mitigating some of that and reducing some of that complexity really revolved around pushing as much of the logic over into the server. So how can you leverage the server to help dictate to all of the different platforms that you're on navigation elements? So make sure that all of the navigation elements from your platform are being served from your back-end services. Make sure that layout hints are also being served from there. The idea there, of course, is that you can provide quick changes to either your taxonomy in terms of how you laid out your site, or even the layout of the different components within your application. References is another one that is maybe not as obvious, which is try to ensure that any references to external services, whether they're services that you host yourself or third-party services, try to ensure that all of those are actually in some type of manifest within the server response, such that you're able to change those very quickly and fluidly without having to redeploy an application. Again, your core goal here is to reduce the number of times you have to redeploy to the devices because of the fact that there's so many ways that you can be gated from doing that. And so what you do is you reduce the surface area for error as you do that. And of course, the metadata. And I think this one is one that most folks do very well, which is make sure whether it's images, whether it's text and data and information related to your content, that you're actually serving all of those things directly from the back end. On the devices side, what you want to do is keep things fairly simple. You're going to want to make sure that your device handles all the rendering, so it takes all of that great input coming in from the back-end service related to the navigation elements, related to the layout hints, and it handles all the rendering. You're clearly going to need to leverage the native components for playback from the device directly. You'll want to make sure that the entire user experience is actually dictated by the application that's on your device. We're firm believers in having native applications in terms of the experience that they provide a user, in that that's really where you're going to find a very optimal experience. And there's very interesting ways that you can actually make that happen. And the last one is really firing events. Make sure that you are capturing all of that great information that you're getting, again, whether it's passive or whether it's active. Make sure that you're trying to collect information about your users so that you can improve their experience over time, so you can get a sense for what features can be deprecated, and make those tough calls in terms of simplifying your application and your platform. So next question I have really is a hybrid approach right for you. And by hybrid, I really am talking about a world of the application side, the devices side. Now, what I think most folks are typically familiar with in the application space for connected devices is really a native application, and those are compiled applications that are pushed onto a specific device, typically written in Java or Objective-C or other lower level languages. Or on the flip side, you'll see a lot of interpreted applications. Typically, those are applications that are hosted on a web browser within the device. They're based on HTML, JavaScript. There's also a new breed that I think a lot of mobile developers will be very familiar with, but that we're also leveraging actually at Hulu on the device landscape, which is a hybrid application. Hybrid application will contain a native layer. The native layer will actually contain, again, a compiled binary. It'll handle a lot of the native experiences that I was talking about earlier, where we want to capture some of the performance. We want to make sure that we have access to things like the playback engine with its stronger DRM. You're going to want to make sure that you have access to the network stack. And the other thing that you want to try to avoid on this portion of the layer is frequent updates. This is the portion of the layer that you want to build very infrequently, that you want to have it be extremely stable, because what you do is you embed within that native layer an interpreted layer. And that interpreted layer is going to have and handle all of the UI components. Here's where you'll have a lot of JavaScript, highly likely. It's going to be the interpreted component. And this is the part that's actually served from your back-end services. This is one that you can actually change on a very frequent basis. It could be something that on application load, you automatically pull from your services before you get started and before you actually load up all the UI components. Now, there's some incredible advantages to that. One is that it makes deploying to multiple platforms significantly easier, because now what you're focused on is building a really great experience through the interpreted layer and building much smaller components natively on each device. So it reduces the amount of complexity that they have to deploy on a per-device basis. It reduces your deployment gates. That's on the assumption, of course, that you build a very stable native layer that doesn't have to be redeployed multiple times, because the rest of your application can be redeployed fairly easily. It does reduce your test matrix, which is great, because one of the things you can do is really focus in on testing the interpreted layer in significant ways to ensure that it will be usable across all your platforms. And one of the great things is it does preserve the native capabilities. And so determining whether a hybrid approach for application development really makes sense for you This is one small chart, again, not completely exhaustive, but the concept here is to identify some of the advantages and disadvantages of building native versus a completely browser-based experience versus a hybrid. And I think that this is a decision that every team is going to have to make on their own. But one of the great things is that you can reduce some of your complexity by, on the development side, by splitting up kind of the development process that you have. And you can have some folks focus on the native, which is a little bit lower leveled languages. And you can have a few other folks focus on the JavaScript implementation. And so there's a lot of advantages to doing that and moving quickly. Now, in thinking of all of those ways to kind of mitigate some of the risk in the challenges that you see, I think one very, very obvious kind of thing to point to as the foundation for all of this really goes back to the team. I know that at Hulu we've always thought that the team is a function, or the company itself and the success of the company is a function of the people and its culture. And so for us, that's always been a really critical component. So I thought it was really important for me to share that with you. In terms of the team, one of the critical things to do is really embrace flexibility and simplicity. And by simplicity, there's two areas of that. One is ensuring that your team isn't focused on 5 years out in terms of when they're building out their platforms and services. The reality is that the market and the industry is changing so quickly, and so many different opportunities arise. You really don't want them focusing out too far out when they're looking at their platforms. A 2-year outlook is probably pretty good in terms of looking at the platforms that they're building currently. In terms of flexibility, you really want to maximize the opportunity for your development team to go out there, explore, try different platforms, try different languages. We typically look for extremely strong general athletes, developers who love to hack and who love to be into different types of languages and frameworks. And the advantage to that, of course, is that all of our developers and all the different developers that we have feel very comfortable jumping in and out of different types of projects. And it means that we have great flexibility, even on the team, to move folks around. And there's no better way to encourage folks than to have them learn new things. Be transparent and trust the team. And by being transparent, I mean make sure that your team recognizes all of their great successes, but that you're also very, very clear about all the areas that weren't successful. And I think that a lot of times in the engineering world, you'll find that folks really appreciate having clarity on areas that you believe they didn't succeed in, whether it's in a bad architecture choice, which is totally fine, and it's great to give people the flexibility to make mistakes quickly, or whether it's in a feature that everybody at the company thought was going to be extremely successful, but we just haven't hit it out of the park yet. And I think that that's okay. The reality is that the important part is that people have that view, that you're transparent with them, and that you trust them. And that's another component. On the trust side, what we found is that giving the team the autonomy to build and to look and identify the different frameworks that they think are going to be extremely valuable as they build a new feature or platform has turned out to be extremely valuable. And so trusting the team, making sure that you're hiring people with great judgment, and giving them the opportunity to build and grow the way they need to is really critical. Consistently bet on talent. This is one that I can't underscore. You really have to bet on talent. And the idea behind that, of course, is don't worry so much about somebody's number of years of experience they have in a very specific field. Don't worry about the previous titles they've had. Really focus in on the type of talent that you have. How strong are they? How committed? How passionate are they about what they're building? And really give them the opportunity to stretch themselves and challenge themselves out there. And finally, value the team to a fault. Again, this goes without saying, but make sure that the team knows their value. Now, I know that a lot of times that's focused in on the compensation side, but I think that if you really took a step back and looked at what people value the most, it's really having the freedom, so being autonomous, really being given the opportunity to be autonomous, and being given the opportunity to take on really big challenges. And so those are the areas that I tend to want to focus on. And so with that, I really wanted to leave you just with two things. The first is that I will be stepping outside right after this with Steve Jang, who oversees our automation team in Seattle. A lot of you folks may not know, but Hulu's actually based out of LA. We opened an office out here in Seattle a few years back, which is awesome for me, given that I lived out here for a number of years and called this home for a long time. So we'll be out there, happy to answer any questions that you might have, so feel free to come up to us. And then the second thing I thought I should do is that I thought it'd be very irresponsible of me if I didn't play a video for you, given what I do. And so with that, the video really is to cover all of the great innovation that's come out of the Hulu team over the last 2 quarters. So thank you. Thanks.